August 1840. Under the light of a swelling Comanche moon, hundreds of riders swept into Texas like a storm given flesh. They came from the north, from the heart of Comanchería, the vast Comanche empire that stretched from Kansas to Mexico, from the Rocky Mountains to the cross timbers of Texas. They came for revenge, for honor, for blood. And they brought with them a message written in fire and hoofbeats. You killed our chiefs. Now we will show you what war truly means. What followed was the largest Native American raid in the history of the United States. A military campaign so audacious, so devastating, that it would reshape the Republic of Texas and haunt both sides for generations. This is the story of the Great Raid of 1840, the Comanche Moon Raid, and the blood feud that made it inevitable. To understand the Great Raid, you must first understand the Comanche. By 1840, the Comanche were not a scattered tribe clinging to survival. They were an empire. Comanchería covered more than 240,000 square miles across the southern Great Plains, from the Arkansas River to the Rio Grande, from the Cape Rock escarpments of West Texas to the foothills of New Mexico. This was their land, and they defended it with a military sophistication that rivaled any European power. The Comanche were horse lords, masters of mounted warfare. A Comanche warrior could fire 20 arrows with deadly accuracy while riding at full gallop. He could hang from the side of his horse, using the animal's body as a shield, and still reload and fire. He could ride for days with nothing but dried meat and water, covering distances that would kill a European cavalry unit. They raided constantly, into Texas, into Mexico, into New Mexico. Raids were not random acts of violence. They were the economic engine of Comanchería. Horses, captives, goods, guns. The Comanche raiding economy fed thousands of families, supplied their allies, and funded their wars. But by the late 1830s, that empire faced a new threat: the Republic of Texas. After winning independence from Mexico in 1836, Texas began expanding westward. Anglo settlers pushed into lands the Comanche considered theirs. Towns sprang up where buffalo had once grazed. Farms appeared along rivers that had been Comanche hunting grounds for generations. And the Comanche watched. At first, there were attempts at peace. Sam Houston, the first president of Texas, believed in diplomacy. He negotiated treaties. He tried to establish boundaries. He understood that war with the Comanche would be long, bloody, and expensive. But in 1838, Houston's term ended, and the new president, Mirabeau Bonaparte Lamar, had very different ideas. Lamar believed in expansion, in manifest destiny, in the removal of native peoples from Texas entirely. He declared that the Comanche must be driven out or exterminated. He sent rangers to patrol the frontier. He authorized attacks on Comanche camps. The Comanche responded in kind. Raids intensified. Settlements were burned. Captives were taken. And the cycle of violence spun faster and faster. By early 1840, both sides knew this was heading toward war. But it was the Texans who made the first catastrophic mistake. March 19th, 1840. San Antonio de Bexar. A delegation of Pennateca Comanche chiefs rode into town under a white flag of truce. They had been invited by Texas officials to negotiate, specifically to discuss the return of captives, white settlers, mostly women and children, who had been taken during raids over the past several years. The Texans had made their demand clear: return all captives, and we will talk peace. Keep him, and there will be consequence. The Comanche delegation was led by senior chiefs, 12 of them, along with dozens of warriors, women, and children who accompanied them for safety. They rode openly into San Antonio, confident in the sanctity of the truce. But they brought only one captive with them. Her name was Matilda Lockhart. She was 16 years old, and when the Texans saw her, they were horrified. Matilda's nose had been burned off. Her face was covered in scars and bruises. She had been tortured, beaten, and abused for over a year. But worse, she could speak. And she told the Texans what they feared most. She said there were more captives, many more, held in Comanche camps to the north. Some had been tortured. Some had been adopted. Some were being held as bargaining chips. And the chiefs sitting in that council room knew exactly where they were. The Texas commissioners, led by Secretary of War Albert Sidney Johnston and Colonel Hugh McLeod, made a decision. They would detain the chiefs until all captives were returned. Soldiers quietly surrounded the council house. Armed men moved into position at the doors and windows. And then the Texans made their announcement. The chiefs would be held as hostages. The reaction was immediate. The Comanche chiefs drew their knives. Warriors in the room pulled war clubs and tomahawks. Women screamed. And someone, no one knows who, threw the first blow. Chaos erupted. Soldiers fired into the room. Comanche warriors fought back with blades and bare hands. The fight spilled into the streets. Warriors who had been waiting outside joined the battle. Texan militiamen fired from windows and rooftops. It was brutal. It was close quarters. And it was a massacre. When the smoke cleared, 35 Comanche lay dead, including all 12 chiefs. 7 Texans were killed, and more than 20 wounded. 27 Comanche women and children were taken prisoner. The bodies of the chiefs were left in the street, and the survivors, bloodied, grieving, enraged, rode north toward Comanchería with a single message. The Texans have declared war, and they will pay in blood. Deep in the heart of Comanchería, the news spread like wildfire. The chiefs had gone to San Antonio in peace. They had carried a white flag. They had brought a captive as a gesture of good faith. And the Texans had murdered them. For the Comanche, this was unthinkable. A violation of every code of war they understood. Treachery of the worst kind. And it demanded vengeance. War councils were held across the Comanche bands. Chiefs, warriors, medicine men, they gathered in the sprawling camps along the rivers of the southern plains. Fires burned through the night. Drums beat. Songs of war were sung. And a plan began to form. It wouldn't be a small raid. Not a quick strike against a frontier farm. This would be something Texas had never seen before. A full-scale military invasion. The war leader chosen to command this campaign was a chief named Buffalo Hump, Poshaw-Naquar-Hip in Comanche. He was in his 40s, a seasoned warrior with decades of experience. He was known for his tactical brilliance, his fierce courage, and his ability to unite warriors from multiple bands under a single command. Alongside him were other prominent leaders. Yellow Wolf, a young and aggressive war chief. Medicine Water, a respected elder. And dozens of band leaders who pledged their warriors to the cause. By summer, the coalition had grown. Hundreds of warriors, some estimates say as many as 400 to 600, prepared for war. They gathered horses, they made arrows, they sang death songs and painted their faces for battle. The plan was audacious. They would ride deep into Texas, not just to the frontier, but all the way to the Gulf Coast. They would burn settlements, take captives, steal horses, thousands of them, and they would show the Texans what it meant to provoke the Comanche Nation. The target, Linnville, the second largest port city in Texas. A thriving coastal town where goods from across the world arrived by ship and were distributed inland. It would be a statement. A message written in ashen hoofprints. This is our land, and we will defend it. August 1840. The Comanche moon rose full and bright over the plains. Under its light, the war party assembled. Hundreds of riders, each mounted on the finest horses the plains could offer. They carried bows of Osage orange wood, powerful enough to drive an arrow clean through a man at 50 yards. They carried lances tipped with steel trade points. Some carried rifles taken in previous raids, and they carried rage. Buffalo Hump led them south, down from the Caprock, along the Colorado River, through the rolling hills and oak forests of central Texas. They moved fast, covering 40, 50, sometimes 60 miles in a day. Scouts ranged ahead, watching for Texan patrols. The main column stayed together, a river of horses and warriors flowing across the landscape like a dark tide. The first settlements never saw them coming. Victoria, a small town in South Texas. The Comanche hit it on August 6th. Buildings burned. Livestock were driven off. Residents fled or hid. The warriors didn't linger. They took what they wanted and moved on. Then they turned east, toward the coast. August 8th, 1840. Dawn broke over Linnville, Texas. The town sat on the western shore of Lavaca Bay, a natural harbor on the Gulf of Mexico. It was a prosperous place. Warehouses lined the docks, filled with goods waiting to be shipped inland. Bolts of cloth, barrels of flour, crates of tools, luxury items from New Orleans and beyond. About 200 people lived in Linnville. Merchants, dock workers, families, they felt safe. The coast was far from Comanche territory. The closest raids had been 50 miles inland. No one believed the Comanche would come here. They were wrong. Just after sunrise, lookouts spotted them. A massive dust cloud rising to the west. Then the sound, a low rumble that grew louder and louder until it shook the ground. Hundreds of Comanche warriors thundered into Linnville at full gallop. They swept through the streets like a flood. War cries echoed off the wooden buildings. Arrows flew. Buildings were set ablaze. The residents ran for their lives. Some fled into the bay. Families waded into the water, mothers carrying children, men swimming toward boats anchored offshore. Customs collector H.O. Watts and his family made it to a small sloop and watched from the water as the town burned. The Comanche did not pursue them into the bay. This wasn't about killing civilians. It was about humiliation. About showing Texas it was vulnerable, even at its edge. The warriors ransacked the warehouses, and what they found amazed them. Bolts of silk and calico, mirrors, top hats and umbrellas, crates of ribbons, barrels of sugar. Things they had never seen before. Items from a world utterly foreign to the plains. Warriors draped themselves in silk ribbons. They tied bolts of cloth to their horses' tails, letting them stream out behind them like banners. They opened umbrellas and laughed at the strange contraptions. They smashed mirrors and marveled at their own reflections. They loaded pack horses with goods, and then they torched everything else. Linnville burned. The smoke could be seen for miles, and the Comanche rode north, driving before them a herd of horses and mules unlike anything Texas had ever seen. Estimates vary, but most historians agree. Somewhere between 1,500 and 3,000 animals. One of the largest herds ever assembled by a plains tribe. It was a moving city of hooves and dust, a river of stolen horses stretching for miles. And at its head rode Buffalo Hump, the war chief who had just humiliated the Republic of Texas on its own doorstep. News of the raid spread fast. Riders galloped north from the coast, spreading the alarm. Linnville is burning. The Comanche are moving inland. They have thousands of horses, they're heading back toward Comanchería. Texas militia companies began assembling. Rangers from multiple frontier counties rode hard to intercept. Matthew Caldwell, a legendary ranger known as Old Paint because of his weathered skin, took command of one force. Felix Houston led another. Edward Burleson, a veteran Indian fighter, organized a third, and they had help. Tonkawa and Lipan Apache scouts joined the Texan forces. These tribes were longtime enemies of the Comanche, rivals for hunting grounds, for horses, for survival. They knew Comanche tactics. They knew the routes Buffalo Hump would take, and they wanted revenge of their own. By August 11th, Texan forces, around 200 men, had positioned themselves near Plum Creek, a shallow waterway about 15 miles south of present-day Lockhart. It was the perfect place for an ambush. The Comanche were slowed by their massive herd. The horses and mules needed water, needed rest. And Buffalo Hump knew they were being pursued, but he also knew his warriors were exhausted, loaded with loot, and miles from friendly territory. Retreat was the priority now. Get the horses home. Get the warriors home. The raid had been a success, but the Texans weren't going to let them go that easily. August 12th, 1840, mid-morning. The Comanche column approached Plum Creek. Warriors rode alongside the massive herd, keeping the animals bunched and moving. Women and children who had accompanied the raid stayed near the center, protected by the warriors. The landscape was rolling prairie dotted with oak groves. The creek ran shallow and clear through a wide valley. It should have been an easy crossing, but the Texans were waiting, hidden in the tree lines, positioned on the high ground. 200 men with rifles, revolvers, and a burning desire for payback. Matthew Caldwell gave the signal. The Texans opened fire. Rifle shots cracked across the valley. Comanche horses reared and scattered. Warriors wheeled their mounts, trying to locate the enemy. The herd panicked, animals bolting in every direction. Buffalo Hump rallied his warriors. He knew they couldn't win a sustained fight here. They were outnumbered, exhausted, and burdened with loot and livestock. But he also knew they couldn't abandon the herd without a fight. The Comanche charged. It was the kind of mounted assault they were famous for. Warriors riding low, firing arrows at full gallop, using speed and shock to break enemy lines. In open terrain, it was devastatingly effective. But this wasn't open terrain, and the Texans weren't infantry caught in the open. The Rangers held their positions. They fired in volleys, reloading quickly with the practiced efficiency of men who'd fought Comanche before. The Tonkawa and Lipan scouts flanked the Comanche warriors, engaging them in running skirmishes through the oak groves. The battle became chaos. Gun smoke filled the air. Horses screamed. Men shouted in English, Spanish, and Comanche. The sound of rifle fire mixed with the twang of bowstrings and the thunder of hooves. Buffalo Hump led a desperate charge to cover the retreat. He and his most experienced warriors held the Texans back long enough for the women, children, and bulk of the herd to escape northward. But the cost was high. Estimates vary, but somewhere between 35 and 80 Comanche warriors were killed at Plum Creek. The Texans recovered much of the loot taken from Linnville. Bolts of cloth, mirrors, goods scattered across the battlefield. They also recaptured hundreds of horses and mules. But Buffalo Hump escaped. And so did the majority of his warriors. And critically, so did most of the horses. The Comanche retreated north, driving what remained of the herd before them. Still numbering in the hundreds, possibly over 1,000. They had lost warriors, they had lost loot, but they had accomplished their mission. They had struck deep into Texas, burned a coastal city, stolen thousands of animals, and proven that even the heart of the Republic was not safe from Comanche vengeance. The Great Raid of 1840 sent shockwaves through Texas. For the Texans, it was a moment of reckoning. They had believed themselves secure, believed their settlements were too far south, too well defended for the Comanche to reach. Linnville had been the second largest port in Texas, and it had been reduced to ashes in a matter of hours. The psychological impact was profound. If the Comanche could strike the coast, nowhere was safe. Texas President Mirabeau Lamar responded by intensifying military campaigns against the Comanche. Ranger companies were expanded. More forts were built along the frontier, and attacks on Comanche camps became more frequent and more brutal. But the Great Raid also changed how Texans viewed the Comanche. They were no longer seen as scattered raiding parties. They were a military power, an organized force capable of strategic planning and devastating execution. For the Comanche, the raid was both a victory and a warning. They had avenged the Council House Massacre. They had humiliated Texas. They had stolen a fortune in horses, animals that would feed, transport, and enrich their people for years. But they had also lost warriors, experienced fighters who could not be easily replaced. And they had revealed the full extent of their power, which meant Texas now knew what it was up against. Buffalo Hump understood this. In the years that followed, he attempted diplomacy. He negotiated with Texas officials, seeking peace treaties that would protect Comanche lands and prevent further bloodshed. Some treaties were signed, none lasted. The tide of Anglo settlement was unstoppable. Every year, more families poured into Texas. More towns sprang up. More land was claimed. And the Comanche, despite their strength, could not hold back that tide forever. By 1845, Texas was annexed by the United States, and the U.S. military brought resources the Republic of Texas had never possessed. Professional soldiers, better weapons, systematic campaigns. In the 1850s and 1860s, the Comanche fought on, but they were pushed farther west. Their hunting grounds shrank. The buffalo herds dwindled. Disease and warfare took their toll. By 1875, the last free Comanche bands surrendered and moved onto reservations. Comanchería, the empire that had dominated the southern plains for over a century, was no more. Buffalo Hump lived to see the beginning of this decline. He died in 1867, long before the final surrender. He had spent his final years trying to protect his people through negotiation, through adaptation, through any means available. But the world he had known, the world of the Comanche Moon, of the open plains, of the great horse herds, was already disappearing. The Great Raid of 1840 is often told as a story of frontier violence, Indians attacking settlers, brave rangers fighting back, victory and defeat. But that's not what it was. It was a collision between two nations, two empires, both fighting for survival. The Republic of Texas was expanding westward, driven by the same forces that had driven American expansion for decades. Land hunger, economic opportunity, a belief that this continent was theirs by right. The Comanche were defending Comanchería, defending a way of life that had sustained them for generations, defending their people, their culture, their right to exist on land they had claimed through strength and held through skill. Neither side was purely good or purely evil. Both committed acts of violence that we would find horrifying today. Both believed they were fighting for something righteous, and both paid a terrible price. The Great Raid was the largest Native American raid in U.S. history. but it was also one of the last great displays of Comanche military power. A final demonstration that the empire was still strong, still capable, still willing to fight. It didn't stop Texas expansion, but it forced Texas to respect the Comanche as equals, at least for a time. And it left a mark on Texas identity that endures to this day. The image of the frontier, the ranger, the struggle between civilization and wilderness. Much of what we think of as Texas was shaped by those years of conflict. Under the Comanche Moon, hundreds of warriors rode into Texas seeking vengeance. They found it. They burned a city, stole thousands of horses, and proved they could strike anywhere, but they couldn't stop what was coming. And in the end, Comanchería fell. Not because the Comanche were weak, but because the forces arrayed against them, disease, technology, sheer numbers, were overwhelming. The Great Raid of 1840 was their defiant roar, their declaration that they would not go quietly, that they would fight until the end, and they did. Today, if you drive through Central Texas, you'll pass through towns that didn't exist in 1840. You'll cross rivers that once marked the boundary between two worlds. You'll see fields and suburbs where the Comanche once hunted buffalo. History has a way of erasing what came before. But if you know where to look, the past is still there. In Linnville, or what's left of it, you can stand on the shore of Lavaca Bay and imagine the smoke rising, the warriors riding through the streets, the families fleeing into the water. At Plum Creek, there's a historical marker. It tells the story of the battle, but it doesn't tell you what it felt like. The thunder of hooves, the crack of rifles, the desperate struggle between men who believed they were fighting for everything. The Great Raid of 1840 was more than a historical event. It was a moment when two empires collided, when the future of Texas hung in the balance, when decisions made in anger and pride led to bloodshed that echoed for generations. It was a tragedy for the Texans who lost homes and lives, for the Comanche who lost warriors and eventually their homeland, for everyone caught in the grinding wheels of history. But it was also a testament to courage, to defiance, to the refusal to surrender without a fight. The Comanche moon still rises over Texas. The rivers still flow. The land remembers, and so should we. This is Texas. This is our history. Complex, violent, tragic, and real. If you want more stories like this, stories that honor the truth and the people who lived it, hit that like button and subscribe to Texas Tales. Because history isn't just about winners and losers, it's about understanding and remembering. Come back next time. There are more stories to tell. Take care.